faces, but how many of you are groups who've come to hear about funding and have any specific questions? I'm extremely happy to tailor this to any specific questions.
I've got sort of a generically type question, which is the impact of COVID on how funders assess applications.
Okay.
Because every organisation is probably going to be saying the need has never been greater, but if everybody's saying that, how do you distinguish one from another?
Yes, thank you. Anybody else with a particular question? I'll make sure I cover.
Yes. Some kind of question where some organisations have large turnover, but don't necessarily have lots of money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When they're excluded from applying for certain funds.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a good question. I suppose starting from the beginning, in that we are we have a whole range of funds. Let me just click down through the slides. Yeah, we obviously, like many funders, have worked really hard through the last 18 months with emergency funding, and we made a huge number of grants, and a lot of those were relatively light of touch in terms of how we assessed really quickly, and the criteria. The criteria were always, the focus is voluntary community group and meeting need, always. We've tried really hard not to drop anything vital in assessing that. We have to do our due diligence. We did make it a bit shorter. In terms of income, certainly I'm answering the question first rather than doing the whole presentation, but I'm more than happy to divert off to whatever you want to talk about, because I'm mindful that you've been sitting a while, and a lot of you will have seen the Hertfordshire Community Foundation presentation before, which is about how we manage a huge range of different funds. Probably the most critical thing about that is we've got our own funds, what I'd call our internal funds from our endowment, which has been growing every year, and we make grants every year and we'll continue to make grants every year forever from that. And that's where you apply for only up to about £5,000, and then that goes to a grants panel, and then we match the successful grants with particular funders that we've got who contributed to our endowment, and that will happen forever. And those associated with those grants have a certain set of criteria, and yes, the amount of reserves we have are important there, but we have changed through the pandemic in assessing that. On top of that, we have a range of different funds from external sources. We've had quite a lot of, and most notably during the pandemic, National Emergencies Trust Fund, which came from the national fundraising during the 18 months, and we spent about £1.5 million of that during the pandemic, and we made grants between £2,000 and £10,000 with that, and adjusted to the need as we went along, based on a survey that we did last May. Well, actually, no, it's a year ago now, but we've just done another one. We're about to give the results, and you will have heard from every funder saying the same thing, as you just mentioned there, that what we found is that the need in the pandemic has become, since the pandemic has become greater. We all thought there'd be a bit of relaxation, but there isn't. And that actually what it echoes is our original Hearts Matters needs analysis that we released back in 2020, which highlighted particular needs in the county. And what we found from our pandemic need, I'm just going to go up to those that may or may not have involved you, Holiday Activities Programme Fund, which was a Department for Education through the Local Authority Partnership Grant. And that is nearly £2 million this year as well, so it's been massive, trying to get children into holiday activities who are eligible, benefits-related eligibility for free school meal. That did involve a large number of groups we haven't met before, and lots of small groups. It required mobilisation of not only the voluntary sector but also the public sector, and we also funded, unusually for us, profit-making sector, but because that was the fund was very, very constrained about the budget, the application and the criteria. So the criteria on that one were really, really strict. The punchline of this is it depends on the programme. So we've also had externally lots of corporate funders as well. So at any one time, Hertfordshire Community Foundation could have a slightly different portfolio of grants, which is why it's always worth looking at our newsletter, at what's coming up and what's being reformed. But the core remains, and the core is our endowment funding, £300,000 or £500,000 grants a year, small grants. And so those are the ones that we have some control over, how we interpret them. We've raised the minimum income, the maximum income level recently, and we are now considering grants income for groups of above 100,000 and up to much larger than that. And if it's not usually over £1 million, but certainly during the pandemic, we weren't looking at income, we weren't looking at reserves, we were looking at who can meet the need the fastest on the ground. So we did very much relax and focus just on the need and the immediate relief of it. But when we're managing other funders' grants, then we stick to their criteria and have to. So we have some influence over what we ask people for. And indeed, we did the quickest grants we ever made were via a SurveyMonkey application form, but that was to do with Herts County Council needing to spend money really quickly so that it didn't get lost to the county, and us trying to help make sure it went to groups we knew had passed their due diligence and were meeting a need. So we have full range, I'm afraid, still, of really intense looking at the assessment and much lighter of touch. One of the grants we've got at the moment, I don't know if anybody in the room is involved in adult social care at all. No? In which case I won't go into it in any detail. But that one is another HCC Community Opportunities grant, and that's quite onerous in terms of what we need to do, but it's less onerous than if HCC was running it. So we can be more agile, which is why they're giving us some funds. So let's have a look. Do you mind if I make sure that's right? So that's a bit of a rambling way of answering your question, and Ian, a bit of a rambling way of answering yours, which is...
It's this thing about, I'm not just talking about the CVS, but we've just had our accounts, and we've talked about how we want to hit the stage where we're turning over £1 million, but 650,000 of that are restricted projects where the money comes in and it goes out, and so the actual organisation itself is relatively small in terms of its support. It probably turns over 300,000 to 400,000. I know that's a lot more than a lot of local groups, but that then precludes organisations of our size from accessing
certain funds, yes. Yeah. I mean, you can still apply to us.
And we have done.
And you have been successful.
Well, yeah.
We do take that into account. We take restricted funding into account. And you are a project-based organisation, as quite a few are that we actually fund. So we do look at that. We do look at that much more so than we did 5 years ago. So I would say yes, we are aware of it. We still, the fund holders for the endowment funds still like to prioritise smaller groups in the same way that you support smaller groups. As a support organisation, our brief is mainly to support smaller groups. So we still have, for example, one really tricky example is hospices. Hospices, as you know, very professional fundraising, very effective fundraising, really strong fundraising model. It's probably everybody in this room probably donates to hospices, and everybody in this room probably knows somebody who's benefited from a hospice. And people feel very passionate about hospices. But our trustees decided that our funding wasn't appropriate to pass on to hospices because A, they are all sort of 6, 7, 8 million, and B, our funds of 5,000 would last a few hours for some people and really couldn't make an impact. And also, why would we do that if we're going to take a fee because we do, as an organisation, there's a small fee on all pass-through funds, and there's a small fee for managing the endowment as well. Well, it's a fee. Why then, when hospices can attract money so directly from people, why should it come through us when people are more than happy to give it? So during the pandemic, the Lord Lieutenant actually set up a separate fund for us to just give, so that he and colleagues who really wanted to give to the hospices could do so without taking any fee of it. But it was just because people felt very strongly about it, but they all agreed it shouldn't be a grant. But then a hospice is different from, say, a CVS. It's not running lots of different projects, and it's arguably a core service that we would love to be funded publicly and centrally, and it's essential. But we are for the smaller groups, supporting, on the whole, supporting the groups and people that you as the CVS are supporting. So that's why we'd be able to support the CVS on the whole, because we relaxed the top there. But is there anything more I can say about accessibility that anybody would find useful? Hello.
Hello. We had a holiday course and it's for over 8s. Do you think there'll be anything for the under 8s?
In which over 8s? I don't
The
know.
Happy Project.
Okay, it was over 5s for Happy.
Is it over 5s?
It's over 5s, yes. So it's actually 5 to 16.
Would you ever do anything for younger children?
There are funds that support children from early years, yes. That particular programme doesn't. Early years, I mean, and that's a Department for Education run. They're going to be reviewing to see if it's going to be run again next year. Then it will make it clear whether it is or not. But on the whole, it was just for school-age children. That was the intention.
Thank you.
So which group were you from? What was your Happy project?
It was Wormley and Peterborough.
Oh, okay. Sorry, anyway, so if any of this is completely irrelevant and you now don't want to talk about it, I'm more than happy to chat about whatever you want to chat about. This was a slide, unfortunately somebody might even recognise this one, about trying to match the needs of the funder to the needs of the applicant. This is about our basic eligibility, and I've talked about the over £1 million. One thing that people often ask is, because we run so many different programmes, people often ask if they can apply to more at once. If they're separate programmes, the answer is yes, absolutely. If you have a grant with one programme, you have to send in the monitoring before, and a certain time period pass before you can apply to another. And also, unsurprisingly, if you've got more than one grant with more than one programme and you apply to us for something else, we'll want to know how you're doing with the other grants. So we take it on a case-by-case basis. And if there's monitoring in one programme, we'll look at it when we're considering another. So what can you apply for? I've also sort of talked about that too, because it's all based on the social need in Hertfordshire, which you're probably extremely aware of, but which we've highlighted in Hertfordshire Matters 2020. And we're just about to publish our next survey, which is a sort of longitudinal one on the one we did in May 2020, when we were trying to work out where to focus the money on that we were still getting in through the National Emergencies Trust. So, and all of that still stands. So, as I was saying before, the high levels of need that were already highlighted in Hertfordshire Matters like mental health, domestic abuse. And the digital divide has possibly been highlighted a bit more with the pandemic than it had been in Hearts Matters. And that one has been challenging, as you all know. I mean, the story changed from the very beginning to all the way through. Of course, education now is quite a critical issue too. We've funded examples of all those costs. This is just a list of our programmes, and I have a handout here which you can have a look at. We didn't used to do individuals besides the Hertfordshire Children's Fund. We didn't used to fund individuals, but we now have the St Albans Care Leaders Fund. We would love to have an East Herts Proximal Care Leaders Fund, a really lovely fund, but it came from an ex-mayor of St Albans, and it was about, I'm only telling you because it's a really nice thing, and it was, we call it the sort of godparent fund. So where we fund families in need generally for up to £300 for children's bedding and white goods, this one is specifically for care leavers, to have something that they wouldn't normally be able to have or be able to afford. Not absolute essentials, but something that will enhance their life that other young people of their age might have a wealthy relative or an aunt giving them. So like a laptop or a bicycle. Anyway, it's a very satisfying fund. There's now in here a whole short list of ways of writing your grant application, but I'm sort of thinking, I'm not sure that anybody here is wanting to see that or know about it, but I can leave, if you don't want to go into detail, I can leave the presentation for you to see. And there are, of course, grant application writing courses that come through HCF training.
We'll send out the whole course.
Yeah. I did this because it was a sort of broad brief, and I wasn't quite sure who'd be here and what your interest would be. I'm not going to make you sit through this. We talked about demonstrating need. We have it on our website, and obviously it's not just Hertfordshire Matters, but there's also Local Insight, which some of you might be familiar with, that HCC runs, which has got great data in it. But for most things, I'm sure you'll find just Googling your question will bring up one of the local resources. This one, ours comes up quite a lot. What could we take away here that you don't already know? I mean, we can still give great examples of excellent applications and poor applications, and some people who write huge amounts often lose sight of the wood, as it were, because it's very, very simple in the end. Is it what do you want to spend the money on, and how is it going to help, and which need are you addressing? And a lot of our applicants, even from very good organisations, still get lost in the we do this and we're very good at that and we have this fabulous impact, and then actually forget to tell you what they want. And you have to then look at the budget and try and work it out. You probably know all that, but it's something that we have to keep, oh look, we're at the end of it. It's something that we have to keep saying to people, and I say we're very happy to talk to you.
Helen, I was just going to say one of the most successful bids that I made during the pandemic was we had an extremely long Word document with all of our answers and how wonderful we were and how hard we worked. And I had about 3 hours to get it in because there was a deadline and I was going away. And I got on there, and it was one of the lottery funds where they didn't give you an indication of how many words. So I had this massive document that I was trying to get into the application. We had all the budget and everything, and I cut it down so much, and then he kept saying, no, too many words. So I cut it down again and again, and eventually I had no idea what I'd ended up with it. I couldn't save it, and I had to rely on all of my notes for what I'd said. And it went in, and of course then it disappeared for 2 months, and I thought, no, nothing. And that was the biggest grant we got during the whole of the pandemic.
Excellent,
because
excellent.
It forced me to take out the absolute crux of everything I was trying to say.
You're so right, Jack. And that it really does help, because we can always come back to people. And that you've also highlighted the one thing that distinctive advantage of our online application system is you can save the application as you go along, which is really useful. But yes, you're right. I mean, we all do that, and we should all. You're quite right. The speed of operation during the pandemic forced many of us to be a lot briefer.
Some of the other lottery funds are still saying, sorry, we haven't had time to change this. You can't save it. You've just got to get it ready to go. Which is a nightmare when it's a lot of money.
Well, it is. And I know that my colleague Georgina, who put the slides together about the writing text, said put things in Word documents so you don't lose them. But you don't normally lose hours. It's very rare that anything goes wrong, but your writing Word documents do. And also the reduced number of words. And also, what we would like to do actually is move to just an interview. Yeah, if we have just a few more resources to do that, it's a really effective way of doing it. We often find when people apply to us, we don't really know them. We have to talk to them anyway because it's really hard to work out what they're doing, and then that's really valuable. But it does take time, but it's worth it if you then start building a relationship with someone. And likewise, if there's a group we know that helps with shortcuts, we have to be really careful that you're up to date and haven't missed something new that people are doing. I'm thinking you all had quite a long day, and I just want to be really cogent and give you something you might want.
Was there any other questions? We'll send out the...
Yes, and if you want to take this away, you can. If not,
I think so. One of the other things to say is that this area is still quite low, isn't it, in terms of the amount of applications that come from the east of Hertfordshire. So
Broxbourne particularly is one that we're trying to get up. I mean, the value of grants we made in the pandemic between East Herts and Broxbourne was proportionate to the amount of money we had in terms of dividing it up, but we do definitely need more applications.
I sort of agree, you might have a bit more chance than you do in other parts of
You're absolutely right, Ian, because one of the things the panel does consider is where geographically the area of need is, and there could be two applications the same, one amount of money, and if one's in an area of greater need or with fewer applications, it does well. But the takeaway is sign up if you haven't on our website. Just because you didn't get it one time doesn't mean there isn't a good fund coming up. Because we change so much.
we send out, we have our funding bulletin, a month ago, we do include all of the Community Foundation funds as well.
That's great. I mean, just the link to the website, because it's changing constantly. And we're happy to talk to you. We have been incredibly busy and haven't always been excellent at getting back quickly, but we will if there's something, especially deadlines come up.
Thank you.